We have one last leg for snow in the northeast, but also a fire risk for the Eastern Rockies, Southern Plains, and Florida. Good morning, I'm meteorologist Pew. It's November 11th, 2025. So starting with 850 millibars or 5,000 feet above the surface, looking at this low level pressure that we've been looking at throughout this week that's been causing a lot of lake effect snow is now around the Quebec area. And because that's counterclockwise flow in the northeast, we're still going to have some west to northwesterly flow. So throughout the day today, we can expect another couple inches of snow. So looking at the big picture of things, at 500 millibars or midway to the troposphere, that really huge trough that we've seen throughout this week that caused a lot of cold air to come from the north all the way down to the south is finally passing to the east. But with that being said, we're going to have a lot of post-frontal conditions. So throughout the United States, we've had a cold front pass through that brought in that cool, drier air. And that dry air is going to be pretty consistent because on this side or the west side of this trough, we're going to have a high pressure. And so if we go down to the surface, we do have a high pressure somewhere around the Louisiana, Alabama area. And this high pressure is going to be doing two things. Because it's clockwise flow, we're going to have a little bit of the southern Appalachian dry air come down to places like Florida. But in addition to that, if we look at the mid-levels from 700 to 300 millibars, we have a huge swath of dry air. And because high pressures are associated with sinking air, we're going to have a lot of that dry air aloft go down into the southern states. And because of that northerly flow, it's going to be going down to places like Florida too. And with the high contrast in temperatures from places like Florida and the Gulf and the Atlantic, we're going to have a high pressure gradient, which thus is going to increase the surface wind to about 10 to 15 miles per hour sustained. And so with that northerly flow bringing in that dry conditions, we're going to have relative humidities around 20 to 30%, which is exactly why the peninsula of Florida is going to have a fire risk today. But speaking of a fire risk, we do have another fire risk for the Eastern Rockies and almost the entirety of Texas. And there's a couple similar things happening, but also a little bit different as well. We're still having that contrast in temperatures, which thus is increasing that pressure gradient, thus increasing that surface wind speed. But another thing that's contributing to the surface winds, if we look at 500 millibars, we do have an isolated low pressure or a little bit of a perturbation right here. And so in this case, there's a little bit of a vorticity maximum and adding a little bit of spin and more updrafts. But in this case, because this area is so dry, we're not going to have any severe weather. So even though we're going to have upward motion in this specific area at the surface, because we have a low pressure here, it's actually going to increase that pressure gradient around it, which is going to increase that surface wind. And so again, with low pressures being counterclockwise flow, we're going to have that westerly to northwesterly flow, which is helping aid that downslope warming. So with the winds going down with the mountains, both warming up and drying, that's why we're going to have a fire risk for both Colorado and Texas and around this low pressure that we just talked about. We're going to see surface wind speeds from 15 to 25 miles per hour and maybe wind gusts up to 35 miles per hour from the Eastern Rockies and Texas. And these high sustained wind speeds are not only in just these areas too, they're also in the Northern Rockies, Northern Plains, and also for the Midwest as well.